the turnaround time for things is 75% easily longer than it used to be. It's more than half. And so I have people with an expectation saying, hey, I have a project coming up that we need to do a build, and I need to make sure that I have everything in order, and they give me, I don't know, a month or two to do it. It's not long enough anymore. Yeah. I need minimum 90 days to do anything, even small stuff. And I think it's kind of lost on the consumer of the insurance product that's where we're at now.
And we don't just, type in what you're doing into Google and it shoots back a price. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
You actually
we have
to
an
talk
underwriter shortage. Yeah. I mean, it's quite honestly, we do not have enough people that are able to assess the risks and perform everything on the carrier side. So the retail agent myself is sitting there going, listen, I really do know this is a timeliness issue. And if I could change the world, I would do that for you, but I can't go it. So they're even experiencing those issues. And then speaking towards, I talked about premium increases based on all those things. That's a big challenge in understanding why those things are so high. The influx of people coming in is also affecting that. If you think about it, there's more bodies on the road. And that's more opportunity for accident. That's more people who are not Texas insureds that don't necessarily have their policies in order, or maybe they're underinsured. So there's a lot of litigious situations that are taking place as well.
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook, the podcast where we welcome business leaders, CEOs, and industry experts to discuss the rise to the top, building wealth, and real estate insights. Here's your host, Jeremy Spann.
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook. For more information on this show, you can go to our website, myexperiencedrealtor.com. And for my fellow Marines out there, that's experienced with an ED at the end of it. Click on podcast, scroll down to this episode and any other episodes, and hit the read more button to find out about our fabulous guests. And today we're here with Jordon and Beth. How are y'all doing?
Doing great.
Doing good.
Doing great.
Lovely day in Fort Worth.
Man, I feel like I seriously dressed down today. Y'all come in here like y'all are going to be like presidents of the planet, and then I'm wearing a Tommy Bahama shirt.
Oh, you look like you're dressed for the weather.
I'm dressed for the weather. Like, it was funny. I'm on TCU's NBA alumni board, and last week had a board meeting, and I was literally like, do I have a jacket? I'm looking through. I was like, oh, wow, I got like 3 button-up shirts, right? It's funny. Right. COVID has caused that, right? Like, who needs things anymore?
So I was stuck in my house for about 2 years when I'd taken this consulting job right at the beginning of 2020, not realizing that, in a month and a half, I was going to get stuck at home. And I was used to wearing suits about every day. And when I started working with Jordon, I had to go into the closet and actually get dust literally off of jackets so I could, pull outfits out.
We've actually had to have a conversation with the staff now that the world's opened back up. We're kind of like, okay, guys, people are coming in and we're seeing
no more sweatpants.
Again. Yeah, pajamas are not really on the scope anymore. We need to regroup about that. So brush your hair, be good. So yeah, we've definitely had to regroup about that.
Oh, it's funny. So Cowtown Warriors Ball, we have it on the last Saturday of February every year, and it's so I fly back and forth. Like Laura just stays in Colorado. She's like, you can go back to Texas. All right. So I'll just usually fly in for a few days and then fly back. And she's like, hey, when you fly back with the dress that's in the closet. And so I did. This is in January, I think. And so she was like, okay, I got to get shoes. And she literally would go to stores and couldn't find shoes for the dress. That's how much things changed, because now people didn't need high heels and stuff. They wanted comfy shoes.
We literally just had that conversation.
Yeah. Crazy,
that
isn't
whole
it?
Supply situation, it's cut off in every way, incling fashion. So we don't have anything now.
She even went to what's the one over there off of Hewlin she goes to?
DSW?
DSW. She was like, yeah, there used to be 14 rows of shoes, and there was 1 row, and everything else was comfy shoes.
Yeah.
Right? Which brings us into, I start every one of these off with a joke.
Okay.
And I do so because when I started the show a year and a half ago, my father-in-law said, you got to do a joke. So I intentionally do bad jokes so that way when he listens, it annoys him. All right? What are the only 2 seasons in Fort Worth?
Rodeo and non-rodeo season?
that would generally be close. was football and construction. But rodeo and non-rodeo, I mean, that is, so for the audience out there listening that might not be here in Fort Worth, is rodeo's big here in Fort Worth, stock show syndicate, everything else. And so January is just always insanity. right?
Absolutely. Well, really, up into February, assuming you spend most of our time, probably 60 days, either prepping, doing rodeo, or recovering from rodeo.
Doing rodeo. So when I started Cowtown Warriors, the mistake I made in 2014 was that I had my first event in January, January 18th. I learned really quick. Nope, that's way too much competition for trying to have a successful event. And so that's why we moved it to the last Saturday in February, which is funny because the lesson I learned, because a lot of people don't know about Tarrant County that we live in here, is it has more nonprofits per capita than any other county in the United States. And there's literally an event every weekend for something. So that was another reason why I picked that date in February, because it was literally when I was looking through the roster of, who all has what, that was the only open one where I was like, hey, we're going to make a run at this is what the weekend it is. Plus I wanted to make it marine proof and go, it's always on the last Saturday of February. And they're like, what date is that? And I'm like, the last Saturday in February. I don't know, whatever date that is. Right. And then people are like, okay, last Saturday in February.
Yeah, it's pretty smart. We actually do insurance for not-for-profits. So we are absolutely involved in and engaged in all of them, whether we support them because we enjoy them or because we do their insurance or whatever. So we are at a ton of events. It's kind of silly. We spend a lot of time having to, and we enjoy going and doing all those things, but it's a pretty busy schedule for sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So tell us about your business.
Well, we're a boutique insurance agency, and what that means to us is that we're not a part of a larger 800-pound gorilla. Right. So we think that affords us some flexibility as far as our ability to give higher levels of service. We have the same amount of market access as a larger agency would, but we're able to make specialized solutions for our clientele, and we think that's pretty special. We primarily do commercial lines insurance, business insurance. We do bonds, things of that nature. But we also do personal lines insurance with a focus on the high net worth or private client group sector.
Okay. All right. Wow. And then so I remember when you... Because I remember, Beth, when I met you at the Fort Worth Club when you were working for the Chamber.
That's great.
Right? And when you left, is that what you left to go do? Was this or was that?
No. So I've had a kind of a weird career path. Not that that's uncommon, but when I left the Chamber, so I was working as their Vice President of Investor Relations, right? So you're looking at a member group of around 1,800 and then, an investor group of probably around 52. And so you're managing sponsorships, investments, and essentially you're selling the service of economic development to your businesses that are buying in. And there had been a consulting firm that had worked with the Chamber for about 20 years, and their niche was working with solely Chamber of Commerce's standalone economic development organizations or municipalities that were trying to privatize their economic development department. And they came to me and said, hey, we're growing. Do you want in? And the offer was you get to go to every major metroplex across the nation. You get to talk to, you're talking to 500 CEOs here in Fort Worth. You're going to talk to 500 CEOs in every major metropolitan area where we work. And I was like, well, why would I say no? And so went and did that, traveled, every week for, like I said, a month and a half. And then we shut down.
Because of COVID?
Because of COVID, right? And especially because of where we were in major metros, there were some really stringent policies in terms of you can't come into the office. And if we're not in the office, we're not getting flown in by our clients to do the things that we need to do to help their organization get better or actually run fundraising campaigns for them. And so you know me a little bit, and you know that I'm a talker, but I'm also an in-person person, and I need to be out and about. That's just who I am. And Jordon and I we met when I was at the Chamber.
And also the Fort Worth Club.
The Fort Worth Club,
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that was 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it took a while of convincing, but once Beth figured out that she wasn't going to get quite the expectation of the job that she originally took, I coerced her into wanting to try an insurance lifestyle. So she doesn't specifically do insurance at our firm. However, she is clearly very, very good at business development. So I hired her in as VP of operations to help me take my business to what I hope is the next level.
Okay. And so how long have you been in this gig here?
So I've done insurance for 17 years in totality. And then
Did you start when you were 2?
Yes, exactly. Right out of kindergarten. And
They allow licenses when you're that young in Oklahoma. You can test and get licensed at 2 to do insurance.
I've actually been doing insurance in Texas for about 9 years now, and we moved specifically the home office to Fort Worth in late 2018.
Okay. So not originally from Texas?
No, and I don't want anybody listening to judge me for this. I'm an Okie. I'm originally from Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I got here as fast as I could.
Like everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't blame everybody. I hear kind of the whisperings of all these people coming in. I was like, ugh. Yeah.
So you grew up in Oklahoma?
So I've not lived in Oklahoma for 9 years. We do still do business there. We're actually national, so I can do business in pretty much any state, not really Alaska and Hawaii, but everywhere else we're able to do some insurance business.
So my wife hasn't called you about Alaska yet?
Well, no, but she should
So we
call me
talked
about Colorado.
Yeah. So she's, 'cause as we were talking about, we're going to Alaska for a month this summer, and I'm deathly terrified she's going to feed me to a bear. And so, okay, so now did you grow up in Oklahoma?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I grew up there and went to high school there, right in a little tiny town. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. It's called McLeod. It's a speck. It's a dot on the map. But I got to go to college in California and then made my way back to Oklahoma, did the whole get married, have a family situation, and then made my way to Texas because I really was very clear that I was going to have a lot of limitations in what we were able to do in the insurance business in Oklahoma. At the time, it was really only oil and gas, and there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity outside of that. So it made a lot of sense for me to make my way to the Metroplex where I just saw all the opportunities available.
That's fantastic. Now, Beth, are you originally from Fort Worth?
No, I'm not.
Where are you originally from?
Well, so I was born in Bloomington, Indiana.
Okay.
My father did not want me to have a Hoosier Social Security number, so we immediately, I'm not even joking, he was house hunting in Jacksonville, Florida when I was born. We immediately moved back to Jacksonville, Florida. My parents were Navy, and so that was one of the spots that they, had been for a while. Moved back to Jacksonville. We moved to Mansfield, Texas when I was 7.
Okay.
And grew up there, went to college for a moment in Missouri, came back to UTA, and after graduating UTA, moved over to Fort Worth.
Oh, wow.
So I've been here.
That's right. Now I do remember something about Mansfield.
Mm-hmm.
What year were you in high school down there?
I graduated in 2007 from Mansfield High School.
Okay. My cousin went to Mansfield, but I think he was Bruce Anderson, name rings?
It probably does. So in terms of Mansfield and that growth, when I went to elementary school, there was 2, right? And that was kind of Rendon, South Arlington, and then Mansfield.
Yeah.
And there was 1 high school.
Yeah.
By the time I graduated, there were 3.
Yeah.
There's now 6.
Wow.
So they've experienced tremendous growth.
That is, so it's crazy. So I grew up down in Burleson and actually right over there off of Rendon Road, right down on the south part of it. And actually, had I lived on the other side of the street, I would have gone to Mansfield, which was still a far away way. And then, so I ended up in Burleson. And so literally it was like if I had lived on the other side of the street, that's where the dividing line was. And then now even like you look at towns like Mansfield, Burleson, Azle, Aledo, Weatherford, they are not the small towns that we grew up in, right?
They are not. I mean, when I grew up in Mansfield, it still had fields and it doesn't anymore.
Yeah, no. It's so interesting to say that. It's I was down in Burleson a couple months ago, whichever, and I thought, man, I'm going to go drive by the old house because I grew up out in the country.
Yeah,
right?
1187 in Rendon Road.
Oh, yeah. And I went down there and I was like, am I on the right road? Like, there's all houses and stuff now. And so things had really changed, which goes into one of the topics I thought would be cool for us to discuss is the explosive growth going on here in the Metroplex. Right? now 12th largest city in the U.S., I believe, right?
Where do you want to start?
Yeah.
and still going. I mean, I'm actually just excited about not just the business opportunity, but also like the social aspects of things. There's so many different things that are coming in. Like, for instance, we had Hamilton and fun stuff like that. There's so many cool things going on, so many restaurants opening up. I'm actually just excited for the social life of it as well as the business aspects.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Texas for a while there under, the Rick Perry governorship moment, I mean, he was fighting hard for economic development and had some of the best incentives out there. And, we strayed away from that for a little bit if you look at the recession era, and the bounce back hasn't been as great, but, we've been pretty good about landing deals. While I don't work for the chamber anymore, I think they're doing an awesome job in terms of their recruitment and working really well with the city. They just announced their retooling incentive packages. So that's really exciting.
That is exciting. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I think stunted, is that the right word? Stunted the growth of Fort Worth, was offering opportunities for other corporations to be able to move their businesses here, right? Now they're doing it in Dallas and Irving and all those other places. Like, hey, why are we not bringing that in here? I mean, since you were working for the chamber for a long time, what do you think the reasons for that were?
So it's there's multiple, right? It's not just a rifle approach; it's a shotgun approach, and you have to have not only attraction but also retention and expansion, right? And Fort Worth is pretty good at retention and expansion. There's smaller cities or cities that used to be classified as smaller cities that have different eligibilities to use their sales tax dollars for incentive dollars. Fort Worth does not have that ability. Dallas does not have that ability. Frisco sure does.
So this is interesting because I don't know much about that topic. Is why don't they have that ability?
It was based on size, and so that was stated at the Texas legislature. Well, I can't speak today.
Hey, don't worry. I just start making up words. So
all right, that might happen too. But that was decided at the state level, whether you were a 4A or 4B city, based on your size and how you were able to grow your city based on your size, right? So if you're thinking, I'm a small city, I've got not enough people, I don't have, whatever resources I have here to grow, but, people are spending money here. They're driving through my gas stations. I'm getting money from this type of sales tax. I wish I could use that sales tax to grow my city and to offer these types of incentives. And government said, yep, you can. But the ones that were already at a certain capacity were not allotted that same ability. So
how does that get countered? Or what is a counter thing to do?
Creativity.
There you go, right? Creativity.
Right. So there's still certain incentive packages that can be offered, and you look at, what types of repayments can happen, or deferrals in terms of taxes that you receive from a business. Creativity in terms of marketing, in terms of, okay, well, yeah, you can get a huge chunk of money from over here, but all of your residents live in Fort Worth, or all the people who are going to work in your business live here in Fort Worth. And here's what that looks like. And here's what our schools look like. And here's what our culture is and why it would be so important that your business be here because of this great fit. And so you have to have a sales approach to getting businesses to come to your area.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, because when people hear Dallas Fort Worth, right, they think it's one and the same. And I'm like, no, completely different, right? Absolutely. Not just in atmosphere, but in attitude and everything, right? As everybody thinks all the billionaires live over there. And I was like, man, you can actually be bellied up to the bar having a beer sitting next to some of the most wealthiest people.
Can't tell you how many times I've done that.
Yeah. You're sitting there, you're like, oh, wow. So it's kind of like my place in Colorado when I see the Basses come in on their big private jet. And I'm like, I want one of those. And Laura's like, no. She was like, you just want one to have one. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, no. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll keep driving 45 minutes to Durango to fly back, So you chose to move your business here because you saw the opportunities 9 years ago. What were some of the things you saw 9 years ago that really opened that up to go, hey, this is the logical decision to make?
I just saw, well, a lot of the actual political investments and things. I saw more support coming in from that standpoint. I think Betsy was doing a great job doing stuff as the mayor. I felt like Jeff Williams was doing a lot in Arlington. And I just saw a lot of influx of push into those two spaces, which is where both of my locations are. And my thought process was, hey, like Dallas has been seeing a lot of that love for a long time. But what was really nice, like you said, it's a metroplex, but there is polarities. And I love to see that there was going to be a lot more influx of intention towards these areas, and I knew that was coming, so it definitely drew me there. I also really just enjoy Fort Worth. I just love it. I love the overall attitude. I love how beautiful it is. I mean, that absolutely drew me in. So I can't say enough that I'm really happy that we made it here.
Oh, yeah. So it was funny as one of my guests flew in yesterday to be on the show, flew out this morning, I think I was telling you all about. And so we went to the Fort Worth Club, and he was like, you know, he lives in D.C., he owns a couple bars in D.C., and he's got a marketing firm. He's got a serial entrepreneur like myself, right? And he was like, this place is really cool. And I said, man, you want to hear something interesting? This is actually the networking mecca of Fort Worth. People can be members at all the different country clubs, but they're also going to be a member here. Mm-hmm. And then it was really funny because he was like, oh, man, this place must be really expensive. I said, dude, if I told you what my member dues are, you would just laugh.
You know, the Fort Worth Club was the first organization that I joined. But now, to your point, I'm a member of the Petroleum Club. I'm a member of Mira Vista Country Club. Yep. I mean, we have so many things that we are enjoying and using as networking opportunities. And I've just made a bunch of friends. It's funny how I really feel specifically to Fort Worth, you do business with your buddies. I really feel that way.
1,000,000%. You know, that whole your network is your net worth, right? Amen. And everybody knows everybody. I mean, it's like literally everybody's Kevin Bacon here, right? Like 9 degrees of separation, right? Like,
very true statement.
So even if you don't know somebody, you can go, but we have somebody else in common. Right.
Fair enough. And I think that I've been truly lucky as not being from here to be embraced. And that's another thing that I love about this city is that you really can become embraced and completely interwoven into the fabric of Fort Worth society. And I feel very appreciative about that. My professional relationships have led to personal relationships, have turned back around into professional relationships, and on the web goes. So I really do appreciate that fact. You don't have that in Oklahoma. Everything's too far away.
Right. Yeah.
You really
even to counter that is you don't have that same thing in New York where it is very huge and everybody's on top of each other, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have the same camaraderie. I think that another thing is people have wanted us to be successful. So
for sure,
they get to know us, they get to know our personality a little bit and what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish. And it's funny how someone will say, you know what, you need to meet another friend of mine. I think they can actually be there to help you. You know what, let me actually connect you with someone else that I think would be in support of your causes. And before you know it, you really have amassed a network so quickly.
Oh man. So, I've hired a couple people on my, I've got a bunch of different businesses, but on my Spann Group stuff, right? So I hired James Peterson about a year ago, specifically to do business development. And he was coming from the insurance world, right? And it was really funny because when Michael Moore at Lockton hired him like 3 years ago, he was like, hey, I got this guy, James Peterson. I'm thinking about hiring him. And I was like, well, you better before I do, right? And then it was funny is after he graduated the same MBA program I did at TCU, the executive MBA, I was like, hey, man, I said, why don't you fly up here to Colorado and see me buy a plane ticket? He's like, yeah. And then Michael Moore called me and he was like,
Don't you dare.
because James is like, yeah, Spann's flying me up for a couple of days. He goes, man, that's a recruiting trip.
Yeah.
He goes, I know Spann. And Spann had told me 2 years ago,
yeah,
I'm gonna take him. But it was kind of funny. So, that coming from that commercial insurance space, a lot of whining and dining and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I said, look, man, you're going to want to burn the rubber off your tires, driving around. But I said, Fort Worth, you can actually just pick up the phone and start smiling and dialing, and you can grow the business from there, right? Because that's what I hired specifically to do is to come do the actual go recruit the buyers and sellers through just the relationships we've established, right?
Yeah.
And then, which was really cool, is we got it set up in the team where if it's a listing, Michelle does all the work. When it's a buyer, Rianne does all the work. Lynn does all the transaction coordination. It essentially leaves me to do nothing, which is totally cool. I'm totally fine with that.
Leaves you to do podcasts, right?
Right. Get on here and have great conversations,
work,
right?
Yes.
And then Laura does all the compliance nature. It's being a lawyer, she's a high detail person and like cares about dotting the I's, crossing the T's. I wouldn't know a detail if it landed in my lap. But it's been really cool is because the last thing Rianne and Michelle want to do is go hunt business. And then after torturing James to make him do contracts for a while to learn how to do it, the last thing he wants to do is contracts, right? So everybody gets to serve in their roles and capacities. But one of the great things too was, it was like, look, we've already got a great brand. We've been number one in Sotheby's for the last 4 years. And this last year, we were actually in 2021, we were actually out of, I think it's like 4,000 registered agents in the greater Fort Worth area, realtors. We were like number 6, right? And so people are like, oh, how do you do that? And I'm like, relationships. You can absolutely be in this town. You can come from nowhere and nobody and become somebody here just by getting out there and networking and get to know folks. And like you said, you really hit on that I've always known this, but never really materialized in my head is people will care about your success and growth, right?
Absolutely.
Which is cool. And it's authentic.
Well,
right?
And that's what I think is interesting about Fort Worth is that you do have this feel of authenticity. And now I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, every time,
right?
But you find it more often than not where, as long as you're, walking downtown or having a drink in Clear Fork or whatever it may be, going to a charity event, you're going to find somebody who's genuinely interested, and then they'll go, oh, well, do you know so-and-so?
Well, I think that perpetuates itself too. That made me want to go back into my business. Speaking kind of what you were saying is, hey, I want to make sure I'm creating platforms for individuals within my business too, and showing them how I made the same successes. Like, let me show you how to network yourself. Let me do the same introductions. Let me give you a space to really grow. And so when I hire in people, like you were talking about, that's my first part of the conversation is, this isn't hard. I can teach you insurance. Insurance is, it's a snooze fest, but it's not hard. We can do it. What I want to show you how to do though is create the relationships and find your resources. And there's just a wealth of those resources here. And I want to make sure that, like in my business, I too am paying that forward. And I think that's what makes Fort Worth special is, it starts that snowball effect. You start a little bit here and then everyone starts perpetuating that. And it's funny how now it seems like we're all just a big family.
Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of funny. It's like, we didn't even do that much advertising. And the only place I was really advertising is I was doing the Centerfold Fort Worth Club magazine. It hadn't been actually printed in a long time.
It hasn't been printed in a long
right.
time.
And it was funny. And the only reason I did that was to annoy Gordon Rhodes. I was like, your name might be on the building, but I'm doing this that way. Every time you open it up, you see me.
Bless Gordon's heart.
And I love Gordon. He's coming in tomorrow to record. And then it was funny. He was like, so you literally spend money so that way I get to see you. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, nobody else. And I was like, nope, just you. And I was like, if you're going to take my money at poker, I'm at least going to make you look at me every time you open Fort Worth Club magazine. And it was funny because my wife was like, we're going to spend money on this just for that. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, because we don't advertise anywhere else. And I was like, I know, but it annoys them.
Well, and I would say that, we don't do, we do our social media marketing.
Yeah.
We have a website. But I would say that a good chunk of our marketing dollars go to charities.
Oh, 100%. And I think that those relationships is what has grown my business outside of Texas. So kind of like what you were saying is these things have carried these relationships out to the far stretches. I mean, a lot of our California business is very much because we have the relationships that we have here. And I think that, and being involved in those charitable situations, it just perpetuates more of that because it's people of like mind want to do that business with people who also feel the
care about
need
those same causes.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So touching on California, right? We got a lot of people coming from California. Are you seeing any of your relationships out there that are moving here just because the environments have changed? In fact, there was someone, it was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was a couple of months ago. And I sit there talking to him and he goes, I am a diehard liberal and even I hate the governor. In California. And it was like, that's the reason he was moving here is because Texas is a business friendly state. And I could sell my house that's 1,000 square feet for $1 million there and buy a 3,000 square feet house for $500,000 here, right?
Well, and we're even seeing that kind of change the dynamics here, right? So I insure property. That's a huge part of what my universe is. And to see those increases in property values and, use insurance terms, replacement costs, explaining those increases to people who haven't moved in and who don't understand what all that influx is about has presented some challenges. It is difficult to have people understand that what their policies were renewing at for their values of their homes last year, taking such vast and steep increases to this year. It's a big thing to try to get everybody's head around.
Yeah.
So yes, we have seen a lot of influx of people coming in.
Well, and it's tough on the end consumer because, I didn't have a claim. I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I being punished? Well, it's not us. It's definitely not the carrier. It's literally the value of the products that it would take to rebuild or to get you somewhere else.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny is that when we bought our place in Colorado, we closed on it the week of the pandemic, right? Which was a blessing and a curse, it seemed at the time, because it was like, well, if we're going to be hunkered down, we're doing it up there, right? But the other part that I was terrified of, because I know a thing or two about real estate, and I was sitting there going, man, the secondary market's just going to get smashed like it always does, right? It's usually the first one to fall. Mm-hmm. And instead, because COVID changed the world and the perception of how to do things.
Right.
I had a client up in February. I flown him up there because he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about buying a ranch. I was like, hey, fly up here, man. Let me show you some ranches, right? And so I had the agent that I used up there to go take us around. And I was like, hey, what do you think my house, would do right now? And he's like, I could list your house for twice what you bought it for.
I believe that.
And he goes, we'd have multiple offers. And I was like, that's cool because you pulled some shit on me that I pull on people all the time because I spent twice as much buying that house than what I wanted to spend in the first place. Right. So, of course, as soon as he says this, I'm looking at Laura like, hey, you're actually the MBA in my head. I'm thinking through the financial numbers. She's like, no. Because what the hell are we going to go buy?
Well, that's the other thing. Good luck buying something. I just went through that myself. It was very difficult.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge.
Well, I think everybody kind of did what I did. I sold when I thought I was kind of at the top of that bubble and thought, oh, look, I'm so smart. I've made some money on this moment to flip around. And like you said, then I kind of lost it because now what I'm paying to get into the new home was legitimate.
Right. And the property taxes, right? Because those things are soaring. Mm-hmm. Like I remember when we were living over at Fox Hollow down in Overton, and that was, there were many reasons why I needed to sell that house. But one of them was I was tired of paying $25,000 a year on property taxes, right? Which is really funny because when we bought the equivalent of that in Colorado, and I was like, oh, what are the property taxes? And he goes, $2,000. I was like, yeah, okay, a month. That sounds about right. And he goes, no. $2,000 is what your property tax is. I was like, what?
Wow.
Oh.
Like, holy cow, like that right? Because, he's already, and it was one of those things, right? We were looking and all of a sudden he's like, well, I got one to go look at. And I was like, well, that's not on the list, which means it's for sale for more than what I want to spend. He's like, let's go take a look. And then we get there and just incredible views. It stares right at Pagosa Peak.
Listen, I've seen the Facebook photos.
Oh man, it does not suck. And my wife and I, are usually very unemotional about four walls and a roof. And I turned around, there's stars in her eyes, and I was like, how much is this going to cost? And he goes, a lot more than what your budget is. And I was like, he goes, so you're going to have to up your budget. And I was like, fine, but point being is that's happening everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
Because the population keeps increasing, but we're not able to build more houses. By the way, that was going on prior to the pandemic.
Well, and I read a news story just last week that there was this huge development going up, and they decided, nope, we're just going to do one-story houses. We can't get enough wood.
D.R. Horton. I know the article you're talking about. Yep.
Didn't have enough wood to do
They
two-story
don't have enough lumber to build two-story houses.
So that's another thing that's driving premiums is that we're having, it's actually the wait. So it's the time that it's taking a claim to actually go all the way through processing. And if a family is displaced from their home based on a claim, the insurance carrier is paying for you to live somewhere else. So if that's for an extremely long period of time, then that just drives those claims up, which all of this is what's driving these premiums to be so vastly increased.
So it's funny you say that. So in my fund that I started a year ago, some of the houses we knew were going to be vacant per year because we focus on off-campus student housing, right? Mm-hmm. Single-family homes. And I was like, well, this thing's going to be vacant for the next 6 months. And actually, we were able to fill quite a few of them because people needed a place to live while they were going through their claim. Like we have several people staying in them now. Well, and we're like, well, you're going to be out by June 1st because that's when the kids move in. But like there for like 3-4 months. Right.
Absolutely.
And it was just, and they were like, literally, there's nowhere to go. Like even to find a rental. So you and I live in the same area. Yep. Are you still down there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wedgwood.
So yeah. So it was really interesting is you used to be able to rent a house there for $1,000 a month.
That's correct.
Good luck. You're not going to find it. As a matter of fact, whenever I pulled up rentals, used to be able to find like 50 houses that were for rent.
Yep.
And so we had somebody that was trying to move from North Fort Worth down, and they were like, "Hey, I want to rent something." I was like, "Hey, let me look here in Wedgwood." There was like 3 for rent, and
and just turn the clock back a few years, and your average price of a home in Wedgwood was anywhere from $150 to $200.
Yeah,
that's not the case anymore.
We popped above $400.
Yeah.
So
it's wild. So I'm renovating my home and not moving.
Just so interesting you say that, though, right? That's where a lot of people are left up to. Like I'm like the worst salesman in the world, right? Like people call me, think about selling my house. And I was like, well, what are you looking to do? And they're like, well, I'm looking at XYZ. And I'm like, man, you're going to have to go spend $200,000 more to find that. Why don't you just spend $100,000, renovate the place you're at, and you're going to recollect the value.
That's exactly what it came down to for me, because there was, a few areas that I loved and that I wanted to go to, but my requirements are, one, I already have a yard and I have dogs, so that can't go away.
Yeah.
I have a 2-car garage. I like to park my car in that garage, so that can't go away. And the square footage of my home, I could take about 500 square feet less.
Yeah.
What can we do? Nothing without more than tripling to quadrupling the mortgage for a smaller home.
Yeah.
That still would need updating.
So funny you say that is Laura and I, because we do spend a lot more time in Colorado and we do travel a lot. You're like, because our house is like 2,500 square feet and we're empty nesters now, right? As a matter of fact, when Maggie came in weekend before last for my birthday, I was like, hey, whatever you want to go back to Colorado, you better take it, because we're just tired of seeing all your stuff here. You're 21, you can live your own life now. And, but it was funny, as we were starting about 6 months ago, we were like, you know what? Let's downsize. Let's find a smaller home. And the conversation this weekend was like, I think we're going to be in the hunt for another year before we find a smaller home, because there's nothing for sale. And well,
there's a lot of people who had your thought process and then they focused on their secondaries, right? It's like, well, let's go get something lovely and sprawling somewhere else.
Yeah.
And we'll tighten up the purse strings here, get everything a little smaller, a little more economical and reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, everybody had that idea all kind of at the same exact time.
Yeah. And then the only reason we haven't gone to like a condo type situation is I have a moral dilemma. I'm paying ridiculous HOA fees. On something that you're not really going to get your value back on, because between the property tax and HOA fees, you're like, man, even if this keeps going up in value, I'm at best ever going to be a wash. But we were sitting there, and then even then, like I would literally fly in and go look at a house, and then by the time I'd call Laura, there's like 15 offers on it, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I told her, I said, I bet you we're here at least another year. And I said, so if we're going to be here another year, not because, we're very fortunate to have the means to go buy whatever we want. So I said, if we know, let's just go ahead and make a decision that it's just going to take us at least a year. And there was some other projects we wanted to do on at the other house, but it was literally going to take like 90 days of workers being in and out. And I was like, let's just go ahead and schedule that to get done, because it's going to take us at least a year to find something here. And we're seeing that on the competitive offers too. Like, hey, I'll pay 10, 20% above list price. We've seen it where they offer to pay their own agents commissions, offering like 60, 90-day lease backs, just so that way they can get the house. And you have to be competitive in order to do that. And this is where I really struggle with, right? It's just, being a vet, I always feel like a VA offer should win. But if you're trying to use a VA, no way, you're not even, they're not even going to look at it. Right. And so I'm like, then you look at the FHAs, right? And like people that want to be able to buy their first home, they finally making enough money, they can buy their first home. Good luck on that. That's not going to happen unless you're conventional or cash and you have the means to pay ridiculous amounts. So what does that do for the housing here in the area? Right?
Absolutely. You're paying above the conventional loans anyway. They're coming up to where they can go, but the offers you're having to put in are far in excess of that. So there are people having to be able to pony up that cash on top of their conventional. You're absolutely right. It's been tough.
Yeah. And and that's the thing too, is because we still need to have a blue collar working population.
And you need that for growth in the city.
100%. So how do we solve that?
It's a great question. I also think creativity is going to be the answer to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we see the same thing in Pagosa Springs, right? Is the living population is like 2,500 people, right? But they get like 300,000 tourists that come through. So it means you have to have a working population, but because the housing market is raised so much, and look, you're in Pagosa, right? So it's not like, hey, I'll just go to the next town. Like the next town's like 45 minutes away, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's like, what do they do, right? And I mean, this is no kidding. So we got some friends that work in a restaurant, and I kid you not, they make $20 an hour plus tips. And
I remember when I used to work in restaurants, it wasn't nearly that good.
No. Because back
Sure,
here
it was $2.13 when I was
exactly
doing
it.
and I think it's still the same, right? Is you're making that plus tips, but up there they had to do that because they couldn't find any reliable labor. Like you had to
believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, and even speaking to that point, even right here, even in my business, we have had to really be thoughtful and creative about our packages for hiring on new staff. By the way, we're looking like everybody else on the earth. Fully clear, everybody says that. But at the end of the day, you do, and I was discussing with Beth what you make working anywhere. I mean, you can get quite a legitimate wage at Buc-ee's. I mean, they're hiring up with some legitimate income there. And I was sitting there thinking, man, maybe I need to consider thought processes, you know. But
you work for Amazon and Starbucks, and you get tuition reimbursement too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean,
really?
it's taking so much to incentivize folks to want to come and take on these jobs. I mean, it is going to take some substantial creativity. It's the regular salary is not doing it anymore. There's got to be some additional fun things involved, or we're going to struggle getting people to want to move.
And that is a big challenge that we're facing right now. Is even like what we were seeing prior to the pandemic was a massive labor shortage in the construction arena, right?
Absolutely.
And so then combine that with supply chain issues, which I mean, somebody can wave a magic wand that can be done in a day, right? Not really. And so now you combine those two things, right? Is even, and this is what I try to tell folks, like, even if we could wave a magic wand, fix the supply chains today, we're still in the same situation because it doesn't matter if you can now buy nails if you got nobody to swing a hammer. Absolutely. Right? And then, like, even now, so on my fund, one of the properties I bought, scraped the house, building a new house. 2 years ago, it would have cost me $200,000 to build it. Now it's going to cost me $300,000. 2 years ago, I could have built it in 3 months. Now it's taking me 6 months. Right. And I love my GC. He's just like, dude, we're doing everything we can. It is just, and it's a struggle and it's everywhere. Right. And things are going to go up more. I mean, because, hey, you know, if the government can't make more money, they'll just print more of it. So now you're looking at inflation things, which again, it goes back is that affects a certain economic demographic. I mean, do we feel it? Yeah, but we're also very fortunate to do very well. But a lot of people that live in this country are not in that economic demographic where it affects it. Matter of fact, this is a funny thing. My daughter took a job working at Walmart. And I was like, good for you. And I was like, cool, because you're going to need to do something. If you don't go to class, I'm not going to pay for school. Right? And I was like, go to class, I'll pay for school.
Said the same thing. Well, except for the paying for school part. They never did that. That was go get a job no matter what. You pay for school.
I get it from her every time. She was like, I want to go back to the original deal. Like, I'll go to class, right? And I was like, that ship had sailed. So she got a job at Walmart, and I was sitting there. This is how interesting it was. Is she started at Walmart part-time, making more an hour than I did when I started with Fort Worth PD back in 1997, when I started with Fort Worth PD. I was like, you're making more an hour than I did then when I started with the PD, right? And then, so, you know, that causes another string of problems, right? Where used to, you could make 50 grand. That was a good lifestyle, right?
Yep.
If you're not making a hundo now, household income, at least minimum, you're struggling to pay the bills.
That's true.
And so that's,
well, gas. Oh. Good luck buying that.
I think there's been certain industries that have been adaptable enough to respond.
Yeah.
Others that haven't. I mean,
well, anything that's sales and commission, you know, you can kind of work through those things, you know, and you, again, speaking to finding creative ways to get through that. But if you're swinging a hammer, for instance, and you got that regular wage, and then let's say people that had stayed in the positions and worked there for a while, once you've increased the guys coming in, Now you have to increase everyone that was above that guy.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody's stuff is exponentially increasing. And you're like, okay, wait a minute. How am I going to wrap my mind around this?
Yeah. So what are the challenges that y'all are seeing and experiencing in the insurance space?
Well, you name it. Like I said, we're talking about the displacement of families. That's making things take forever. And even on the carrier side, there just are not enough employees and enough
They're
people.
facing the same talent issues that the rest of us are facing.
Absolutely. So the time that things take, just like everywhere else in the world, is taking so much longer. And I don't think people have really put together that even in those spaces, the turnaround time for things is 75% easily longer than it used to be. It's more than half. And so I have people with an expectation saying, hey, I have a project coming up that we need to do a build, and I need to make sure that I have everything in order, and they give me, I don't know, a month or two to do it. It's not long enough anymore. Yeah. I need minimum 90 days to do anything, even small stuff. And I think it's kind of lost on the consumer of the insurance product that's where we're at now.
And we don't just, type in what you're doing into Google and it shoots back a price. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
You actually
We
have
have
to
an
talk to
underwriter
people.
shortage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite honestly, we do not have enough people that are able to assess the risks and perform everything on the carrier side. So the retail agent myself is sitting there going, listen, I really do know this is a timeliness issue. And if I could change the world, I would do that for you, but I can't go it. So they're even experiencing those issues. And then speaking towards, I talked about premium increases based on all those things. That's a big challenge in understanding why those things are so high. The influx of people coming in is also affecting that. If you think about it, there's more bodies on the road. And that's more opportunity for accident. That's more people who are not Texas insureds that don't necessarily have their policies in order, or maybe they're underinsured. So there's a lot of litigious situations that are taking place as well. And then
there's more homes, which means more places for hail to hit that actually cost people money.
Right.
But even speaking back to those litigious situations, so let's say there's something like that takes place. Well, again, when we couldn't get into the court, it's taking a lot longer to turn those claims over. Yeah. We have a backlog of people still trying to get their trials and their court stuff taken care of from the last couple of years. So people with new claims are having to wait even longer to get those claims processed. So it's the putting off and putting off and putting off is making all of this really, really difficult for the carriers and, inadvertently for us.
Well, and I think you hit on it earlier, which is, just the talent shortages. Right? Like anybody right now says, I can't get a job. I'm like, just because you're not looking.
But that's
right?
for sure.
You
Like
can
if
give
you
them
have
my phone number.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are companies out there that are like, wow, so we don't need a resume. Do you have a pulse? Will you show up?
Absolutely.
Please don't wear pajamas. Right.
Can you type? Can you do it quickly?
Yeah.
Can you answer a phone?
Yeah.
And will you show up?
Oh, so when I built the strategy out for Spann Group 5.5 years ago of what I wanted to build, I knew that my biggest challenge was going to be I've got to hire the right people, which means I got to take a lot more time to find the right people or wait for one to finish an MBA. You done with that thing yet? Fine, up here. I got a job for you. And actually the most recent person we added to the team, Rianne, she was actually a client of Laura's back years ago. Ran into her, right? So she was at medical sales, right? She was doing medical sales. And then that had stopped whenever the pandemic hit, because guess what? You're not going to doctor's offices to be able to showcase stuff like, hey, you can, do this.
Absolutely.
And so she ran into her at the Container Store and she was just like, yeah, but instantly we were like, oh, here's someone with sales experience. Because we intentionally do not hire anybody who has been previously licensed, right? Because I don't want to, because we do things a lot different than everybody else. And I'm like, I don't want to unprogram you to reprogram you. I would just rather program you from you not knowing anything to get you where you're at, right? But it took us, so we hired Michelle 4 years ago. We hired Lynn, 20 math for Marines here, so 2.5 years ago. James a year ago, and then Rianne 90 days ago. Or no, it's been 4 months actually. So it took that long just to be able to do that. So I got a call yesterday morning from a friend of mine who works at Sotheby's in San Diego going, man, I am trying to replicate what you have built. And he goes, how do I do that? And I said, find the right people. He goes, I cannot find the right people. And I said, you're looking in the wrong place. But find people that haven't been in the industry. And he's like, yeah, but the time it takes to get them up to speed. I said, man, it is worth
It's worth it.
the time to get them up to speed.
Go to the Container Store. That's what
Right, go to the Container Store, man. I mean, man, you're like, hey, and so it is that interesting because like last week, Goldman Sachs, right? They were like, hey, everybody's coming back to the office Monday through Friday, and their entire pool of employees said no.
No. Yeah.
So what do you do as
Pizza parties?
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you're an employer, so Chris Powers, you know Chris, right? So I had him on the show about a year ago, and he and I are always going back and forth on this topic. He's like, I think people want to come back, and I said, I think a portion do.
Fair.
But what do you do when a large portion says no, right?
Well, and interestingly enough, they also want to be compensated in the same way as the people who do.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is you're not going to use your gas. You don't have to have nice dress clothes on. And
Yeah.
you're not making the effort of time it takes to get up here and participate with the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
Yet you feel your compensation level should be the same. I find that aspect of it a little challenging also. We absolutely have a work from home option. But again, they're saying, well, okay, if we work from home, we want to be able to enjoy the same income space as everyone else. And my thoughts are, well, I don't know that that's really fair to the people who are going to take the extra effort to be here.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too.
So it's really, really interesting as a chief that I worked for when I was at Fort Worth PD. Best boss I ever had, Ken Dean, said, if in being a leader, you got to learn that you treat everybody fairly, but not equally. And I was like, okay, I mean, it makes a little sense. That applies more now than ever because you're like, well, what do we do? And then so when we finished our TCU board meeting, they had a symposium with a futurist on there, and I'm all into that, right? Like I like predictability. How can you hit the nail on the head? Like big George Friedman fan. And that's what she was discussing is like, hey, with inflation and everything else, we're on the down cycle going down. Now it can change, but we got to start thinking different, right? Because like, for example, I think I was talking about this on the show yesterday. This little iPhone is a computer in your pocket that changed the world. And I saw that when my daughter was, oh God, what year did I finally let her get a cell phone? I think she was a sophomore at Nolan. But I wasn't going to do it because I was like, no, I'm not going to be one of those parents where the kid has a phone all the time. But then finally it was like, I had to because she was not able to do the things in the classroom that everybody else was doing. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I had to submit. I either had to submit so that way my kid would have a competitive advantage or go, no, this is what I believe should be done. And then she loses a competitive advantage. Right. And so there are all those challenges that we're seeing every single day right now. Right. And I mean, I imagine in y'all space, just to plus, it was funny when y'all were talking about relationships, right? And this is one of the things that I've always struggled with this in Fort Worth, which is when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I want you to use me," and I'm like, you got somebody else, and it's like, unless they really shit the bed, I gotta stick with them, right? Right. And so there's always that challenge, right?
Sure. And I think that's the lovely thing about insurance is that legally everyone needs it, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's room enough for all. I mean, there's plenty of work here for all of us to coexist. And quite honestly, there's some of us that we are a little more niche to certain things than others. So it's also fair to say, hey, I'm giving this agent a bulk of my business based on what they're really, really good at or their market access is. Yeah. Versus, hey, I know that these guys are a little more experienced and have more market access to other risks. So we're going to go ahead and utilize both. Yeah. And I think it is okay in the thought processes of mine to say we can utilize more than one relationship. I don't want one real estate relationship.
Right.
I don't. Right. I know that this guy may do commercial warehouses better. This guy may do, residential tract homes better. Yeah. This may be this. And so I think it's wise in this universe to utilize more than one resource always.
Oh, 100%. So that's why going into this year, we stopped doing any sort of commercial. Well, one is things were changing so fast and so often that trying to keep up with both was dividing our attention. Mm-hmm. And so we finally had said, no, we'll just refer that out, right? Like even geography wise, right? So, used to, go as far as Grand Prairie to the other side of Weatherford from Denton all the way down to south of Burleson. we were like, man, we were spreading ourselves way too thin because of how complex and fast the market was moving, to where now we've got agents in other places that we go, hey, no, you're going to go look in this area. This is who you call for that area, right? Because that area has changed so much that I don't know that I can give you accurate advice. I mean, I can look at the numbers. I can analyze the numbers all day long, but I might not know what's going on in the neighborhood. A prime example would be 20 years ago, would you have moved into Fairmont? No. Now you can't even afford to get a place in Fairmont, right? I mean, it's just, those are the realities of, the things we're seeing. Right?
Well, and going through, you want to go ahead?
Well, I was going to say, so speaking to that, my headspace also towards, having different relationships is that you may need somebody that can do a little more hand holding. You may need someone that has a little more time and then can give a little broader attention to, maybe you're a new business owner and you're trying to get your ducks in a row. Maybe you need resources outside the insurance universe that we can help you get to. And so I think for those purposes, a lot of times you may need to be strategic about your relationship and say, hey, who my typical guy is just doesn't really have the time capacity for all the individual attention I'm going to need on these projects. So if you're looking for that, that also might change some of your scope. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, so you went through the EMBA program at TCU, and I worked for TCU for a few years, and the amount of business books that they have you read is quite overwhelming, right?
And I can't even read, so it really sucks.
so then you're just audibling all of these books, but there's so many that say, figure out, like, how do you create an amazing business? Is figure out what your unique angle is and dive in. Right. And so when you go to our website or you ask us what it is that we do, and you heard Jordon said, we're boutique, we offer our clients service, and we're their advisors. So it's advice, service, insurance. And that's those three words you're going to see on everything that we print. And that's what Jordon does well at. Now, you can't go to Geico and in 15 minutes save 15%. And it's only going to take you that amount of time, right? If that's what you're going to try and do, awesome. Do it. But
especially if you know what you're doing. If you're a very informed consumer and you have a high level of knowledge about insurance, then you don't need an advisor. But if you don't, you need to know your agent well so that they can give you that correct, it's not just advice, it's resources. So they may know something about your business or a way to mitigate your risk that you just don't know, even though you've been doing this for however long. So I do think when it comes down to that aspect of it, it does matter if you need more individualized attention where you go.
Man, that's so y'all are hitting right on it, is where we even evolved in what we were doing and how we were doing it, right? So we're not a one size fits all. And we don't even try to pretend to be, is even the vetting process after we get a new potential client, right? So our process, the first thing we do, well, now James does it more than me, I don't have to do anything, is he'll sit there on the call and go, okay, first off, understand that this is our process, right? We're going to provide, you're going to decide. We're going to control the process, you're going to make the decisions. But we're not here to change what we're doing if that's what you are. So are you someone that's going to want to do something different? If the answer is yes, we're not a fit. Or if somebody needs more hand holding than the average person, we're not a fit. What we are a fit for is if you're looking to have a team that you're going to be most protected by, because we know the business better than everybody else, and is going to be able to financially analyze things. I mean, we got law degrees and MBAs on our team, right? You don't see that with a real estate team, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, normally there's like, you used to work at Rick's or something and got a license, and now you can sell real estate or something. That was bad. That was bad. Yeah, we might have to cut that one out. We go ahead and time mark that one. But one of the things is, no longer just showing up and going, hey, let me show you pretty houses works anymore. Right.
Well, and bringing the whole conversation full circle, speaking back to a lot of these businesses have new staff. So if you need someone who's able to train your staff that you probably don't have the time nor the ability to do about, hey, let me give you a little idea of how this all works. Yeah. Let me explain insurance to you and why we're doing the things that we're doing, how to get in front of some problems and strategize alongside with me. That's something else that I think is really important now, considering all the things that we're dealing with and all this change is, hey, we need to be able to explain to the staffers in your group why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and then how to better serve them and how they can better serve themselves. And a lot of times this business owner just doesn't have that ability anymore.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the time. So, you might need somebody who can actually really integrate themselves in with the staff so that we can make sure that they know how to best take care of the company.
Yeah. And that's the thing is you're really right on this when you go define what you're good at, and that's your competitive advantage. Right. And you get in there and then being able to articulate that, because we have definitely, these devices have reduced our attention span for anything. Right.
Yeah. If you can't Google it quickly, the first three answers.
I mean, literally now it's like, if you can't describe what you're doing in 30 seconds or less, people have stopped listening. And so it is just, it's like Gary Vee says, right? If you're not trying to put yourself out of business, somebody else is. So you've got to always be evolving, going, okay, what are we doing? Whether it's, you're trying to get talent, you're trying to stay competitive, you're trying to be better than the other competition. Like, one of the things that we decided as a team, and we've always had this methodology, but is we were like, okay, the competitive environment's coming more and more, and a lot of people are cutting their commissions. I said, we're not going to do that. We know what our value is. We're just going to focus on people that can understand the value we deliver and solely focus on them, which means we're going to have, you can't be afraid to turn away business, right? That was the hardest thing for me to learn how to do, was to say no to business because it wasn't the right business. Like last year, we turned down over $4 million worth of production over the course of a year. People were like, oh my God, like I didn't even do 4 million. They were like, how did you do that? How did you survive? And I was like, well, we still did 44 million.
Yeah. I did that with the consulting group during COVID. So during COVID, turning down clients that were going to actually pay my paycheck because we knew it wasn't going to be the right fit. And Jordon makes those same decisions in the insurance firm where...
Right, because there's no one better. I mean, and what we do, there's no one better. We're all really, really, really good. The best and most responsible thing to do is to go, okay, how can I really take care of you? And what's the depth of my abilities with what you're doing? And I just am very careful in those relationships by making sure that I bring value. And if I'm not bringing value, if I'm not helping you lower your overhead, if I'm not helping you make some money, if I don't have a network that can supply you, if I can't support you, then I know I'm not the best fit for you. And the right thing for me to do is to go ahead and let that separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do. I think it's the ownership of, okay, am I really, really bringing something here? And if I can't bring more to your setup, then I know that there's so many great programs out there, great agents, great companies, agencies that can absolutely take care of you. So I just know how to refer people to where I think they need to be.
Yeah. And that's huge. That's enormous. And it's hard to grab that, right? Cause you just want to say yes to so many things.
I think we all felt that desperation piece. Yeah. I mean, if I'm being honest, it was, and no good decisions are made in desperation.
No,
it's not. But I think we did kind of feel that mad dash and grab moment. And I think we all felt that internal fear. But I do think that what is happening now is we're finally seeing that flip over, and now we're all going, okay, let's regroup.
Yeah.
Let's do what's best for everybody. And let's remember there is, luckily, business is picking back up and there is room enough for everybody. And like you said, we're a part of a beautiful space, a beautiful city, a metroplex that it's not slowing down. It's just amping up. So I do think that the opportunities are just going to keep multiplying for everybody.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, and it is, it's just, again, James says, look, you got to imagine that a Boeing 747 is landing with new people every hour. Not every day, literally every hour here in the Metroplex. That's how fast we're growing. And they're not coming with suitcases. They're coming with household goods. They're here to stay. And so one of my favorite things I say on the show a lot of times is everything that's a blessing also is a curse, and everything that's a curse is also a blessing. And if you're not identifying what the curses are and trying to overcome those problems, then you're going to find yourself sitting there like, oh, what do I do? Like one of the things in the real estate space, right? Technology is happening, right? One of the things we saw with technology and real estate is that it was all a house of cards as far as technology whenever the pandemic hit. And people were like, oh, wow, okay, technology sucks in the real estate space. And I said, yeah, except there are people out there that identified that gap and are currently creating, I don't know what, but they're creating, because this is what you always see, right? They're creating something that's going to wipe out, in my opinion, 80% of licensed agents. I don't know what that thing is, but I do know that we need to stay at the top of the food chain, because if not, I don't want to be in that 80% that gets cut because it's not needed. Right?
I think everybody's got that technology takes us over fear. I think the thing that helps me sleep at night is that, back to what we said earlier, people are doing business with us because we're friends and because they feel safe. And even though you may be really informed and you can punch your information into a computer and you can get some sort of outcome, sometimes you just really want to have a conversation and talk through points with someone about why might this be better? Why might this be my strategy? So far, what those technologies have not been able to do is have those strategy conversations, and the whys and what your goals are. You're still just inputting data. They're putting that all together, and then they're spitting something out that doesn't have that touch. I know when I'm worried about something, I'm not going to find my fears being solved punching things in the computer. In fact, when I punch something into WebD, I get more scared. I don't feel better. That technology is not solving my problems and making me feel whole inside.
Yeah.
But what I could do is pick up the phone, talk to my doctor. And my doctor says, hey, this is why I think we're okay. Here's a strategy. Here's a way we can go about solving this. So I do think that even though we all have a little bit of that technology taking over fear, I think the reality of it is, especially what we were saying earlier, the relationship matters. And I think that we'll always have that.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, Jordon, is that word called trust, right? Which is huge. Trust is the currency of business. Right. And I mean, that's why we live by two core values in all my different businesses that I have, which is the first core value is the value exchange. I must trust you. You must trust me. One-sided's lopsided. Lopsided, somebody's in the convincing business. I don't have the time and energy to convince nor be convinced. But as long as we have that value exchange, then that unlocks the second core value, which is the value proposition, in that your money will always be more important than our money. And as long as I treat your money as more important than my money is always going to follow. But I keep that forward of mind to be able to move things, down the road, right?
Well, you just did the commercial for why we are called Core Insurance. We are all about your core values. Your core values are our core values, and we are at the core of your success. We want to make sure that we are a part of that foundation. So that is exactly where the name was derived from.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back to 20-year-old self. Right. All right. Now, I know this is because we would want to tell ourselves like 50,000 different things. But if you knew you could only go back and 20-year-old self would listen to one thing, either do or don't do this, what would you tell 20-year-old self?
Besides, don't get a degree in philosophy. besides that. For me, it would be to really believe in those skills and attributes that I knew I had back then, right? So there is, again, a career journey there and some life choices there where I knew I could do something, or I knew something should be a certain way, but I was like, but it's okay if I make, 30 grand, that's good enough. Or, you know what? I got this master's degree and it's okay that my pay only went up 6 grand. And I'm like, no, part of me goes, I'm worth a lot more to a business than that. Or whether it was relationships or whether it was changing careers. There was a lot of questions, and it took mentors, and I'm glad they had them. I'm glad I had them to say, hey, you should go do this.
Yeah.
You can go do this. Did you know this was an opportunity? Let me introduce you to somebody. But it was taking that belief that I knew that I had the ability. If I could go back to my 20-year-old self and say, you can do this, you're fine, that would have been awesome.
And you, Jordon?
I think mine is more about, I would have told myself to really embrace the skill that I have to adapt, and how strong that is, and that how much it was actually going to serve me overall. And I'm not speaking just to the past few years where we all really had to embrace the adaptations of things, but just overall in the extreme highs and lows of life is my ability to pivot and my ability to regroup has absolutely carried me and countless people with me. You know, I mean, I think that is just so important because it isn't just about me. I needed to make sure that I was adaptable enough that I could protect and care for and take care of others and teach them how. So I think more than anything, if I could go back to myself, I would definitely really impress upon me that is my greatest strength, and it would carry me through the rest of my life, and I'll figure the rest out.
Yeah. And that's, you know, one of the things I love about doing this show is even when I've got folks in here that I've known for many years, learn something new. And I'm always amazed that every time I ask that question, I get different answers, right? So it's a candid response to giving different answers and, you know, believing in adapting, right? I mean, those are things, you know, because we think about, you know, well, we go back and tell 20-year-old self, like, hey, on this night, don't go out that night.
Right. I'm saying be excited for change, you know, embrace it. Yeah. Because that's been the beauty of my life is every time I thought a door was closing, a window darn sure opened. Absolutely. And being able to regroup to that has taken me everywhere I wanted to go. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so people want to learn more about y'all, your business. Where do they go? How do they find you?
They call me.
They call you? All right.
So One Stop Shop's the website, coreins.us. That's how you can reach all of us.
Make sure you get the .us. I still have a lot of people saying I can't find you trying to go the .com route. So it's coreins.us.
coreins.us.
And email beth@coreins.us.
Okay.
That's how you get it. Yeah.
And then, and we'll also put in the links and everything else into the Read More. So if you were driving down the road and you happen to not catch what they said, you can always go to the website, myexperiencedrealtor.com, click on podcast, scroll down, read more on Jordon and Beth. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having us.